Hello EFD squad and welcome back to Transfer Review, where me and Pato put silly season underneath the microscope. We're looking at our best transfer and our worst transfer on one big hitter today, aren't we? Because rumours have slowed up a little bit, windows are shutting, so we're going to put a personal twist on this. Twist. Nipple cripple.
Rude.
Who's your first one?
I've got Yves Bissouma. He's my best signing of the window. 21-year-old Malian midfielder. Was at Lille last season and he's gone to Brighton. And I really like this move because I think even if Brighton manage to go down, it will not be because of quality of player and they'll have a really exciting asset in Bissouma. Now, he only cost them about 15 mil, but he looks like an all-round menace. So last season, huge defensive output, nearly 6 tackles and interceptions a game, but also was completing over 3 dribbles. Now, that's a really rare combination. You see that from Moussa Dembele, you see that from Mario Lemina. You don't really see it from many other people. And when you compare him to somebody like Tanguy Ndombele, now Ndombele is a more attacking player because he was creating 1.7 chances to Bissouma's 0.6 last season. But his defensive contribution is way lower than Bissouma's, and his dribble numbers are kind of about the same. And given that Bissouma had been kind of tangentially linked with Tottenham before the window opened, I kind of thought he'd be a good buy for them, especially at 15 mil. It's nothing. Brighton have got that quality of player. He's 21 years old.
I really like Jahan Bash.
He's good.
Who Brighton have bought in as well. I think they've been very smart since coming into the Premier League, and what they've done is bought in a good enough calibre of player that should they slip down into the Championship, I'd back them to bounce straight back up. Jahan Bash last season, 21 goals, 12 assists, but it was his all-round play that impressed us, wasn't it? 4.3 shots per game, which is not, I suppose, rare in the Eredivisie, where shots are a little bit easier to come by, for sure. However, 2.4 chances created per game for his teammates. I also believe he was putting in around 3 tackles and interceptions. This is a guy who statistically had it all, and what we really like is that his passes were very progressive as well. These weren't safe numbers, let's say. He was a very forward-thinking player. But
and I think he's 24.
He's only 24?
I think so.
How much did he cost?
Ali Reza, I think, was closer to the 18 mark, I think. But when you look at, I completely agree that they've been signing really, really well. Like, they also got Bernardo in at left back from RB Leipzig. And
last season it was Gross, it was Purper, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Izquierdo as well. You know, they're signing guys who are the right sort of age, who've got plenty more to give, who look like appreciating as assets for the club. And I think that Bissouma will give them that solid defensive base and allow Jahan Bash and Gross to get forward a little bit more, because they did struggle for goals at stages last season. So, I don't know, I'm actually quite excited about Brighton. It really comes down to whether Chris Hughton can meld all this talent into one kind of workable 11.
Yeah, I think Brighton are going to be relatively safe. I think a 12th or 13th place finish would represent very decent progress for Chris Hughton's men, and good luck to them because I enjoy watching them. Now, my favourite transfer is a little bit more obvious, is Jorginho of Chelsea, and he's going to be crucial for Sarri's men in terms of getting them playing Sarri ball, because that sort of football is the antithesis of what Conte was deploying last season, wasn't it, in that 3-4-2-1. Saying that, Conte's men averaged 54% possession, Napoli averaged 60% last season, and you'd imagine that Jorginho is going to ramp that right up, wouldn't you, with his ability to retain the ball. Also has solid defensive output, 4 tackles and interceptions per game. Not his primary job, but this may free Kante up to progress further up the field. We've seen it in the early parts of the season. Kante is taking a more progressive stance on his midfield play, I guess, and is joining in more with the attack. We know he's great in the transition. He's very good at pressing high up the pitch, and Jorginho at the base of that midfield is going to enable Kante to be a little bit freer with his play, I guess, less disciplined than he was under Conte, which will probably equate to Chelsea winning the ball back an awful lot more in the opposition's final third. We know Jorginho's passing is amazing. 108 passes per game he was averaging last season. That's the most in Serie A, and 15 more than Hamsik, who is a complete metronome himself in second. And from this, a 90% pass accuracy. And somehow, he still created 1.7 chances per game for his teammates. So not only is he dictating play from just outside his own area, he's still also... Do you know what it was? Last season, it was that chipped through ball. He seems to have perfected it, an absolute pitching wedge of a foot on him, and he sort of has that laser vision as well, doesn't he? decent amount of long-range balls per game last season as well. Don't have the stat with me, but he's got that in his locker too. And he's also only 26, Pato. So he could feasibly be at the peak of his powers for another 5-6 years, the way that Xabi Alonso was at Real Madrid, at Bayern Munich. A player like that could have a very long career under a manager like Sarri, of course, not reliant on pace, not really reliant on mobility, just reliant on intelligence, because last season in the Serie A, people were trying to man-mark him out of the game, and he really kind of evolved his game in order to bypass that. Now, Chelsea now have the best deep-line playmaker. They now have one of the best defensive midfielders in Europe, who's amazing in the transition. So they're really well equipped to regain Champions League football, aren't they? Do you think they're going to do it? Should we throw it out to a poll?
Probably.
Do you think Chelsea are going to get Champions League football? Let us know in the poll just above. Pato is about to inform us of his worst transfer. Let's move on.
Yeah, my worst signing of the window is Thomas Delaney to Borussia Dortmund. But before we get into that, I just want to give a shout out to Bournemouth's capture of Jefferson Lerma. Now, they've paid 28 million euros for the Colombian defensive midfielder, and I don't really understand why. His defensive output is pretty good. He's making about 4.2 tackles and interceptions per game. That's fine, but you kind of want him to be doing something else, given that that's all he does. You know, we're looking at Jorginho. Jorginho is also an amazing passer. And when you compare this to Fulham signing Andre Frank Zombo Anguissa, who they paid 3 million euros less for, he's a year younger, and he makes nearly 6 tackles and interceptions per game. So you just kind of don't really see where they've paid Levante so much for this guy. And believe me, Bournemouth need to sort their defence out. But Thomas Delaney to Borussia Dortmund. The thing is, I think they should have kept faith in their central midfielders this season. They've still got Julian Weigl, they've still got Mahmoud Dahoud, but instead they're going to have to drop one of them to make space for a pretty mediocre player who's on the cusp of turning 27. Now, he costs 20 million euros. Add-ons could take that up to 27, and that would take Delaney from being Dortmund's 9th most expensive transfer ever to their 4th most expensive transfer ever. I don't really get this. Like, 4 tackles and interceptions per game, like we've said, that's solid, but it's actually fewer than Weigl made in the Tuchel years. It's fewer than Dahoud made at Mönchengladbach when he was playing under Favre. He isn't creative. 30 chances in 32 appearances last season. He can't dribble. I think he completed 8 dribbles in the entirety of last season, and his pass completion rate is 72%, which for a central midfielder is woeful. It's actually worse than every Borussia Dortmund player except for the goalkeeper, Roman Burki. Now, that is troubling. And I think when you're paying a lot of money for a guy, he needs to come in and be better than your young players if you're going to take minutes away from them, and he isn't that. So Delaney, it feels like in the last year, or the last 2 years, Dortmund have started going backwards. They got rid of an amazing coach, Thomas Tuchel, to bring in a mediocre one in Peter Bosz. They're now making room for a mediocre player at the expense of really good players. And it just feels like gradually they might slide back into the chasing pack. They're not really the second biggest team in Germany anymore. That's a bit worrying for me.
Yeah, especially given how uneventful the bully was last season. I can see it being
tragic.
The case yet again, although PSG is set to nick one of Schalke's sort of best young defenders.
That's true.
So I suppose a silver lining for Dortmund that their competitors are also getting weaker,
Yeah,
potentially.
Who's your one? Who's your worst signing?
I actually, when you asked me this in preparation of the script, couldn't think of any outstanding candidates, so I kind of plumped on a safe option, which was Gonzalo Higuain to AC Milan. And not because I think he won't score goals at AC, but it is because Matteo Caldara went the other way. I think Juventus, had they kept Higuain, they would have been better equipped to compete on multiple fronts and maybe had a real go at that elusive Champions League title. Obviously haven't won it since
96, I think.
Yeah, 1996. I think they've missed out on 5 since. I think they've reached 5 finals, 4 or 5 finals, yet to reclaim it since. Like I said, okay business. He scored 20 goals in all competitions for the 8th time in his career in 17-18, but his scoring rate did slow down. Netted every 82 minutes last year at Napoli, then about every 124 minutes in his first year with Juve, and then that declined to 176. So that slow decline is settling in, and it is getting exponentially bigger, isn't it? League goals have gone from 36 to 25 to 16, which was actually his worst in a single campaign since 2010-2011, sorry. His shots are now under 3 per game, with 2 of those coming from inside the box, down from 5.5 in total, with 4 coming from inside the box in his final season with Napoli. And all of this when they have a prodigious young talent in the form of Patrick Crotone coming through the ranks. He scored 10 league goals last season, but only played 1,500 minutes to Higuain's 2,800. So if they put a little bit more faith in him, maybe he would be the solution to their problems. They've obviously got rid of Kalinic as well to make way for Higuain, and they didn't get a bad fee for Kalinic. Andre Silva's gone out on loan, hasn't he? So they have kind of cleared out some deadwood to make way for Higuain. So in that sense, I suppose they have almost paid for half his fee in that process. However, I just find the whole scenario a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me.
I'd prefer Juventus to keep him, but we move on to Eriksen to PSG, which is our big rumour we think probably won't happen. Padjan Strachan, let's go.
Yes, according to the Express, PSG are set to make a £100 million bid for Christian Eriksen this summer. Now, he was offered a new contract back in March. They've been talking about this for a long, long time. But while a bunch of the other members of the team have signed new deals, he is yet to give them his signature. PSG have obviously been selling like crazy this summer. They've let Pastore go, Yuri Bacic, Odson Edouard. But, of course, they're still paying that Mbappe fee, €135 million. They've also, as Chris mentioned earlier, made a move to bring in 21-year-old Schalke defender Thilo Kehrer for around €37 million. So they probably have to offload some talent. And the rumour is that Angel Di Maria, Julian Draxler might be on the way out of the door, and of course Gonzalo Guedes. Though I think they're going to get less money for Guedes. If they tried to sell him earlier, they might have got a Premier League club pay upwards of €50 million. Watford offered 60 million supposedly. Valencia, on the other hand, have said that they can't really go above 45. So I'm not really sure that they've done the right thing there, but they can sell him and recoup some of the money. I think that in Eriksen's case, he's probably worth the outlay. I think he'd fit a Thomas Tuchel system really well. He can play actually in central midfield now. He has done that quite a lot for Spurs. He's an amazing mobile 10, and he can play off the wing as well. He was involved in 20 league goals last season, 23 the year before, 19 the year before that. So extremely consistent output and a phenomenal injury record as well.
Yeah, like you've said, really intelligent guy and would suit a Thomas Tuchel system really well, in my opinion. Very mobile, led Spurs for assists last season. He was actually second in the team as well for pressure events, which is pressing an opponent basically, with 18 per game, which is pretty monstrous. And he's been linked with Real Madrid and Barcelona in the last 18 months, so he's not been short of high-profile suitors, has he? And whilst Barca have signed Coutinho, Tuttosport and Star claim that Real could come back in if Modric leaves. Now, he could fit in any one of those sides, couldn't he? That's the highest compliment we could pay him. But Spurs' lack of signings and midfield depth surely means that his departure is far less likely. Pochettino would absolutely lose his mind if Eriksen left. He very publicly called out Daniel Levy at the start of the season in terms of transfers coming in. We thought they were going to maybe go for an audacious swoop for either Kovacic or Thiago Alcantara. None of that materialised, and it went very quiet after that, didn't it? So now they are left with Victor Wanyama. Is he fit after that knee injury pre-season? Probably not. An ageing Moussa Dembele, a very young, talented Harry Winks, but I think he's lacking match practice as well right now. So yeah, if Eriksen was to leave, that would leave a huge hole in midfield, particularly if Kane gets injured as well and Ali has to play in a more advanced role. Not injured, if you rest Kane to get over his sort of injury period, because he's clearly still not entirely fit, is he? Which you are going to get from Eriksen. He's very consistent and has remained very injury-free throughout his whole Tottenham career. He's played 147 of Tottenham's last 153 Premier League games. But if we're going to think outside the box with this, Tottenham are building a massive new stadium, which is costing 850 million, and Eriksen is perhaps never going to be worth more than he is right now. And if you're looking to raise funds, if you're looking to get a club to pay over the odds, what better club than Paris Saint-Germain? I think they could really push them upwards of sort of 80, 90 million euros at the very least for a player of Eriksen's calibre. So it'd be interesting to see if they do come in for him, but like you've said, PSG have to move a lot of players before they even consider bringing someone in. So highly unlikely, but it would be interesting nonetheless. Tottenham fans, how do you think your summer went? Let us know in the comments below. PSG fans, would you welcome Eriksen at your club with open arms? What's French for open arms? Fermez les bouches. So that's all we have time for on Transfer Review, guys. A couple of windows still will be open at the end of the month, so Transfer Review will be back. Patrick Van Straan, what else is on?
Don't care. Move on.
And as ever, don't forget to like and subscribe.